So we're talking about reflection this time, and I thought Maxfield Parrish here looks like he's thinking deeply about something. But anyway, let's get right into it. So a reflection in painting is when an object or a surface reflects an image back to the viewer. So that's how we're going to define it. Now, there's a bunch of different ways to find examples of it, but what we're doing in the slideshow here is just going through some examples that I made and some old master examples, and we'll just sort of go over a couple different things. Um, but the place I want to start is with this painting here, where uh, the picture at the top of the painting has two different reflections of the rest of the stuff on the table in it. And the way that you want to think about reflection is actually really simple. Number one is observe. I can't really stress that enough because what you're seeing, if you follow it closely enough, will tell you what to do. But basically, it's not that different from transparency. But with reflection, what you want to do is take all three aspects of color, all three dimensions, and usually push them in one direction each. So usually in reflection, everything inside the reflection is darker than the same thing outside. The hue, in this example, everything is a little bit more purple and a little bit slightly cooler. It's also everything is darker, and then where intensity is concerned, everything is duller. And I don't know that that's 100% true, especially with the table. The table actually looks a little bit brighter, but since value kind of governs, remember, value is the most important of the three dimensions in pretty much every situation. So if something is a little bit too bright or whatever, a lot of times value can just trump it. So there's that one, and that was in case I didn't mention it before, that was a painting that I made. The next one is by Vermeer, and you can see the mirror that is above it's not a piano, I forget what kind of an instrument that is, but this is the music lesson by Vermeer, and you can see the mirror above the girl playing, and you can see how dark everything is inside the mirror. And when I'm doing reflections, this is kind of what I look at. So everything I did in my picture in the last slide, it's basically what Vermeer is doing in this one. So the values are all darker, the intensities are all lower, and the hues, I don't know if this is cooler. It might actually be warmer. We would have to take a much closer look at it, but as long as everything is darker, it usually works pretty well. And then the next slide is the Arnolfini wedding portrait by Van Eyck. And again, he does the same thing. He makes the reflection, which is a very, very famous reflection, by the way, one of the most famous paintings of all time. Everything in there is darker. Everything in there is duller. And the hues are definitely on the warmer side. And that might have to do with the lighting situation in the room between this one and Vermeer. They're using north light to light their subjects, so the shadows are a little bit warmer, and that since the people are backlit, their backs are in the dark, that's probably an indication that they would be warmer anyway. And then, no. All right, well, Lichtenstein has a couple things going on in this painting that are actually worth talking about. This one's obviously stylistically not really what we would be normally playing around with, but if you do decide to move away from realism and move into a more stylistic direction, it's worth pointing out that these rules that we use to develop certain passages and devices and stuff, they work pretty much no matter what the context is. So in this painting, Lichtenstein has the best thing about it is that he uses a different yellow from the hair outside to the hair inside, and it's really obvious. The It looks like the color of the dots on the hand are a slightly different color than the dots in the skin and the face, but the rest of it is pretty much the same. Like it's the same red inside on the lips as it is outside. So there's some things that he's doing that uh, are very flat. And I mean, obviously, the Lichtenstein thing is sort of a celebration and an exploration of the flatness of printing, and there's a lot of really fun, cool things going on in Lichtenstein's paintings. Now the last painting is another one by me, and it has two different kinds of reflection in it, so I want to take a minute to talk about both. You have all the same characteristics in the picture, where everything is darker, everything is slightly more purple, and everything is duller. And when you take anything purple and make it darker, it always gets, usually it gets a little bit brighter, but I remember when I was doing this one, the purple color I used was like an earth purple, and it was pretty dark, so I didn't have to work as hard at that. But the other reflection is more of a mirror type reflection where it's there's no hue change and no real darkening that you can appreciate. But in order for it to not look like a window, you still have to employ those things. So the reflective surface was actually a little bit warm. So when you look at the garlic inside the reflection and you look at the garlic outside, you can see I pushed everything slightly yellow. And I also made everything darker. Now at the top, the orange table looks a little bit on the left and on the top. The table looks a little bit lighter. That's because it's touching darker values. And the orange of the table at the bottom of the painting never really touches any dark values at all. So it looks a little bit lighter, but the values are, it's actually a little bit darker inside the mirrored part. And then the intensities, when I could get away with it, I lowered them. For the most part, they're kind of the same. But like I said before, observation is your best tool when it comes to reflection. If you're following a formula, it'll work, but you may be missing out on some really good observations if you follow the formula entirely.